Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? Our Provost Forum on Funding and Philanthropy will begin in just a few moments. At this time, we'd like to ask everyone, please begin taking your seats. Once again, our Provost Forum on Funding and Philanthropy is about to begin. Please take your seats at this time. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? At this time, we'd like to ask everyone to please take your seat. Our Provost Forum is about to begin. Once again, our forum is about to begin. Please take your seats at this time. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Provost Forum on Funding and Philanthropy. At this time, please welcome our interim UCF Provost, Dr. Elizabeth A. Dooley.
Hi, and good afternoon, and welcome to the Provost Forum. I am Elizabeth A. Dooley, and I'm serving as interim provost, and I believe my time started at approximately 1:45 p.m. on yesterday. And so the good news is that I'm happy to be here, and it's very exciting because as we've been going through these forums and recognizing that collective impact and our strategic plan will indeed have an impact, it's also important to know that we're going to be supported. And the topics that we'll be discussing today will do exactly that. And we have experts to actually share the detail of how those impacts will occur. So, why do we do these forums? We've made a promise not only to ourselves, but we made a promise to our community. And it's very apparent that UCF believes in harnessing the power of scale. And it's not necessarily about the scale, but we know if we do scale, we can impact a lot of individuals' lives. Attract and cultivate exceptional and diverse faculty and students and staff. Deploy our distinctive assets. I know many times when I speak with the organizations, we often say, what are your individual assets? And collectively, we know we can be better. And so if we pool the assets of the university, even from human to physical, all of those things together really brings about impact. Create partnership. We are known as the Partnership University. I've been here since 2015, and one of the things that I know about UCF, when it speaks about having a partnership and being engaged with a partner, you can believe it, because you're going to see it after it's spoken. And I think that is truly valuable, and that's something that we should be proud of. The other thing, innovate. Academic, operational, and financial models to transform higher education. We're not trying to be like other institutions, and we know that. And as I review some of the data, we looked at the NESE, we looked at the Gallup that the foundation helped us to look at, and oftentimes we compare it with other institutions. And when we see those data, typically we're slightly better. But guess what? We want to be more than better. And here's how we do that, by pulling our collective assets. And so, we want to, next slide, please. We want to look at the process and the progress that we've made in certain areas, starting with funding and philanthropic metrics. And so our endowed professorships and chairs, we've increased in that area from 64 to 80. Alumni giving has doubled to 30,000, from 15,000 to 30,000 donors. Our foundation endowment built to 175 million and working towards 500 million preeminence metric, wanting to generate 100 million in new revenue, not philanthropic, by 2035. You can. Endowed professorships. We know that professors are the engine of the university, and the research in terms of creating new ideas, instilling in our students that there's a better tomorrow because research takes us to a different place. We saw a slight decrease this past year because of funding of 2 positions. However, we're tracking very well this year, and we expect to reach 68. We'll hear more about these efforts from Mike Morsberger. We need to increase 6 per year to hit the 80 goal in 2020. In terms of annual alumni giving, we continue to see gains thanks to the work of Julie Straw. You should raise your hand, Julie, you're in the audience, and her team. Slightly surpassed last year's target. The blue on the slide shows the goal that alumni has set for themselves and their plan to reach 30,000 by 2020. So should I ask the same question, Mike? Are we gonna get there? Mike's team, are we gonna get there? Foundation endowment. This is a stretch goal, but very ambitious. Why? Because UCF says we're big, so we're stretching to reach our goals. Has been helped by the great success of the Ignite campaign. We're on the right path upward, expecting to surpass 160 million this year. In terms of foundation attainment, this is different from endowment and involves all college philanthropic efforts, and this figure does not include other units such as athletics or WUCF-TV. Each college contributes to the 44.5 million 2020 goal. So far this year, the colleges have raised 19.4 million. To reach this goal, we need to increase by 6 million a year. The 100 million change. The slide represents our goal is to attract 100 million in new revenue over the next 20 years. To do so, we anticipate we will need to generate about 5.3 million a year. These funds would be used to pay for new strategic initiatives to help us advance other key metrics and priorities. Bill Merck, our Vice President for Administration and Finance, will address this in greater detail. We'll also hear from Mike Morsberger, our Vice President for Advancement and CEO of the Foundation. But first, I'm going to invite Mr. Bill Merck to present on his topic. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Before I start, I'm going to ask a question. How many of you have plenty of money in your budgets, your departmental budgets, and do not need any more? You're flush. How many of you are in that position? If anybody'd raise their hands, I was going to ask for a donation or a contribution. No. But I do want to help you. Here's what's been going on in the country over the last number of years, as most of us are all aware. A number of years back, public universities depended on the states to take care of their budgets for the E&G portion of it, and it worked fairly well. And then we went through a couple of recessions back in the early 70s and again in the 80s, and then more recently in 2008-9. And the states started to fund things other than higher education at the levels that they had been in the past. And we compensated for that slowdown in state funding nationwide by raising tuition. Well, that was short-lived. There was a huge outcry against raising tuition, so as you know, we've been actually flat on no tuition increases, fee increases for, I think this is the 5th year. But our student body has grown, our needs have grown, our aspirations have grown, so it's really extremely important that we find some new sources of revenue to supplement what we already have in your budgets so that we can reach our goals, so that we can attain the kinds of things that we know we need to do to make sure that our students get the education, the quality that we all expect them to get, and they should be able to receive from us. So when we were starting the strategic plan, or not starting it, but in the process of it, we started talking about this other sources of revenue. So Thad Seymour came to me one day and he said, well, we need a goal. We need some number to put in this if we're going to raise some additional revenue. And so I think Thad suggested we talk about $100 million. And after you gave me some oxygen, I agreed that, seriously, if we've got a budget that's over $1.5 billion, when you start talking about incremental income to make a difference, it's got to be a number like 100 million. Smaller amounts just don't really do what we need to do. So we wanted to talk about things that we want to talk about revenue sources that weren't increases in tuition. That's pretty much off the table right now. We didn't want to burden the students with more fees, at least not excessively so. We didn't want to we know we weren't going to get any more tax money, so it's got to be revenues from different sources. And then how would we use those additional revenues? This particular slide gives some ideas about the types of things that we could use some additional money for. New capital construction, for an example. Any of you that are involved in research right now know that our facilities are not anywhere close to where they need to be to support the faculty that we're bringing in that are doing research and to support the faculty that are already here doing research. So there's a huge need to fund some more capital activities. There's a number of others other than research. But anyway, so where's this money going to come from? We've got a sample breakdown on the chart here, and these are just some ideas of ways that we could generate it. Like real estate revenue, for an example, is one that we could come up with. And I know we've been talking about our technology and patents. We've got a lot of patents out there. are there opportunities to monetize more of those than we currently are? I tend to think there are. There's just a number of things that I think we could do if we really work at it. And they're not going to be easy because, obviously, if it was easy, all the other universities in the country would already be doing these things. We've done some literature research, and we're not finding anything earth-shattering that most universities are doing. I mean, we're not going to get there by adding a couple more donut shops and generating some revenue there. It's got to be something bold and different. So we're going to really go after that. One of the things that I wanted to, and the other part about this that's important is the time frame. We're not talking about doing this overnight. We're looking at a 20-year ramp up. So I think that's really doable. If we pull in $3 or so million a year, we can get there. We really can get there. So it's not as daunting when you look at it over time. One of the areas, though, that we're looking at as a way to generate revenues that I wanted to highlight today is sponsorship revenues. And that's where a few years back we were using a company called IMG to generate sponsorships and media rights, negotiate media rights and things like that for athletics. And about a year and a half ago, we let that contract terminate and formed an in-house team to work with sponsorships, media rights, and that sort of thing. And that has been successful. What we said, though, when we started it was once we stabilized the revenues coming in to athletics so that they're not losing anything over what they were getting under the prior arrangements, we wanted to branch out, and this is the new thing. We wanted to branch out into the academic and administrative areas to generate some dollars there. So what do you have on the academic side that's extremely valuable and different? And that's intellectual capital. It's intellectual capital. So how do we monetize that for you to generate some revenue from from assets that you already have to supplement your budgets with additional revenue? So in that regard, what we've done now is we've asked Kiera Sullivan, and you can come up, Kiera. Kiera is joining us. She's phasing out some of the projects she's working on in athletics now, and she'll be joining us in our suite in Milliken Hall to start spending some time working with you. So I wanted to use the remainder of our time to let Kiera introduce herself and tell you what her plans are working toward this $100 million goal. Kiera?
Thank you. I'll take this one. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kiera Sullivan. I will be the new Director of Academic and Administrative Sponsorships. I want to tell you a little bit about my background as well as the vision I see for the short-term role that I will be taking on. I'm a native of Orlando. My family's been here for over 30 years, so I've seen a lot of growth and change, and I'm very vested in the community. I started my career up in Atlanta at CNN. I got my foot in the door as a tour guide and then quickly made a move over to the media department where I strategically planned the advertising spend for both the TBS and the Atlanta Hawks. I've spent some time in ad sales as well as in marketing. And then about 7 years ago, I took a position with the Orlando Magic in sponsorship development. I found success, but I also found a passion. And most recently, I've been working with UCF Athletics on sponsorship development. And last season, managed and developed about $1.6 million in revenue. I'm looking forward, very much so, to exploring different opportunities here on campus. The next 90 days for me is going to be very exploratory. I want to meet with as many of you as I can to better understand your needs and therefore work with you on creating funding opportunities in your respective departments and colleges. I think the main takeaway here is that the funds that are received through assets in your space will remain in your department. So the owner of an asset will be the benefactor of those funds. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions moving forward, so I'd like to meet with all of you individually and talk a little bit more about the needs in your space and departments. Thank you.
Hello, hello. For those of you I haven't yet met, my name is Mike Morsberger. I'm the Vice President for Advancement, the university's chief fundraiser, and CEO of the UCF Foundation. So I'm going to talk about philanthropy and alumni engagement and where we are in the campaign that many of you have heard about, the Ignite campaign. We'll start by using a couple of quotes. Dr. Hitt's famous line, "Ideas ignite here, led by students, nurtured by faculty, empowered by philanthropy. Together, we reimagine the future." The next quote from Rick Walsh, the chair of our campaign, a two-time graduate, and actually three-time if you count his honorary doctorate, is, "At the heart of this campaign, it's not about dollars. It's about people, the best and brightest people. And it's important to understand how these contributions will impact them." One of my team frequently says, although we're very focused on a $500 million goal, it's not about the money, it's about what the money can do. And so collaboration is key. Everybody working together is key. Fundraising is not the job of just the advancement office. It's everybody's job. And I think the same thing will go for sponsorship. We want you to look at new and creative ideas, innovative thoughts on what might be of value to others out there and how we can partner together. So we've thus far raised $363.5 million in this 8-year campaign with a goal of $500 million, 453 days to go. In order to make goal, that means $2.2 million a week. I want to give you a sense of the magnitude of the things we're doing. And while participation overall is important, and we're going to dive into some of those numbers coming up, the fact is the bulk of the advancement team is very focused, and some of the faculty in this room, certainly the deans, on the big gifts. They will drive the numbers ultimately. Professorships, naming ops on major buildings, other major initiatives underway. We need to focus on gifts, which we call at the principal level, which generally are $500,000 and above. So that's where you'll see a lot of our focus. And there's only so much of us to go around. We are trying to deploy volunteers and, again, engage the faculty in this effort, but I want you to understand where we're spending a lot of our time. 6 years and 8-9 months into this campaign, you can see kind of the uneven nature of fundraising here over the years. One of the things you hope to do with a campaign, in the end, a campaign is an artificial structure. It's a platform by which you can develop priorities, bring them forward, and create a sense of urgency among alumni and friends, corporations and foundations, and put your best foot forward. One of the things we'd like to do is build a fundraising operation at this institution which seeks to raise $80 to $100 million a year, year on year, that Bill Merck and all of you can count on. The uneven nature of the way fundraising has been in the past, you can see there's a little more of a steady climb the past few years. $44 million raised to date the first 3 quarters of this year. We tend to be a last quarter team. We tend to raise more in the last quarter of the year. I am hoping by July 1 that we'll be able to say that we raised somewhere on the order of $70 or $80 million in this fiscal year, which will have been marked by another great increase. That means in the last year of the campaign, we'll raise $100 million to get to that $500 million goal. But I believe we can get there. We have the prospects, we have a team in place and a plan to make that happen. Next up. So one of the things that I think there's some general misunderstanding about is how gifts are allocated. Just so you know, about 97% of the philanthropy that comes into this institution is designated. People tell us exactly where they want it to go. They don't write just a blank check to UCF. They often designate the college, the school, sometimes a professor, a specific department, and that's good. That's good by us. there's 3 categories of giving within that. One is current use, and that tends to be 50-60% or more of what we raise. Next up comes facilities and equipment, capital gifts. We've already passed that goal. And the last is endowment. Unfortunately here, and I think in large part because of our young age as an institution and therefore the young age of our alumni, endowment gifts have not been a priority among our constituents. We are trying to make that more of a priority, and more on that in a couple slides from now. But the fact is, most of our donors tend to be very here and now oriented. They tend to be wanting to invest in facilities and programs and faculty, and that's just fine. Our goal is not to steer donors. It rarely works. It's to ask open-ended questions, find out what their priorities are, and maximize their philanthropic potential. Next up, the Hitt Initiative. This October, after Dr. Hitt announced that he would retire at the end of the academic year, I asked him if there was one thing he could focus on the last 8 or 9 months of his tenure, and in the remainder of the campaign, what would that be? And that was a difficult question for him. He said, that's like choosing among my children. I love all the colleges. I love all the things that go on here. Athletics is special to him. The Honors College, the library, so many things. And he said, well, let me ask you, Mike, what have we underperformed in? Where's something where we need extra effort? And I said, the easy answer is faculty endowment. We need more professorships and chairs. We need to endow deanships. We need to endow fellowships. That's an area that could use extra help. And he said, well, that's what I'll focus on. That will be it. Reluctantly, he allowed me to call this the Hitt Initiative and to focus on that. And our goal is to raise at least $10 million in this area. It folds in nicely with our desire to bring in, take us from 64 professorships to 80, and we're making progress. Just to give you an idea, over the past 10 or 20 years, we have averaged the endowment of 1 professorship a year. This year, we think we'll do 6 or 7. Next year, I believe we can do 6 or 7, and we'll need 7 or 8 the following year to get to that goal of 80. One of the things that's true in fundraising is, generally speaking, you have to ask 3 people for big money to get 1 to say yes. Generally, 1 says no, 1 says maybe, 1 says yes. So when we're shooting for 6 professorships in a year, that means we got to ask 18 people for a professorship. And reminder, the magnitude of those gifts, it's $1 million minimum to endow a professorship. One of the reasons we went down to, if you saw Elizabeth's slides earlier, we went from 64 to 62, is because we had a couple of professorships that were funded at $10,000 or $20,000 that were just in name only. So we did away with those and reallocated the funds. These are big gifts. This is not something that happens all the time here. But we're building a culture of philanthropy and service, and I think it's starting to take on a certain air of importance and urgency, and people want to be in that club. Relative to the Hitt Initiative, next Friday after our foundation board meeting, and halfway through the Celebrate the Arts initiative, we are going to announce publicly the Hitt Initiative to hundreds of benefactors that will be in the room. We will call out the names of those that have contributed to honor Dr. Hitt and to help our faculty endowment. I am hoping that this gets more people talking and that we can go from 7, 8, 9 million raised already to move towards 15 or 20. But more on that to come. It's a very exciting development. I want you to know Dr. Hitt's working hard for you. He will continue to in his year as an emeritus president towards the end of the campaign. What else do I have? Huh? Oh, the video. So a little bit of context in this video. Some of you read last week about the announcement of the Jim and Julia Rosengren gift of $6.6 million. This is an alumnus. A special man that, quite frankly, we had lost touch with for 20 or 30 years. Through the good work of Ray Allen and Dean Michael Johnson, and especially Dr. Beidel. We got to know this family extremely well. They had a particular passion, but through coordination and sort of amplification of their many passions and many interests, we went from an initial kind of conversation of $1 million into a conversation of greater than $6 million, initial conversation of a single beneficiary to many beneficiaries. So I just want to show a quick video, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit in a panel format. I think that's a pretty good setup. Go ahead, Christine.
This school took me in. Without it, I have no clue what I'd have done. The school, it just transformed remarkably, and through the previous leadership and then under the last 20+ years of Dr. Hitt, it is remarkable, and to play any small part that Julie and I can play today is just a joy.
We wanted to be part of, something that we saw and that really captured us. I'm very proud to be in UCF family, and be able to do that.
It's not about the money. The money is not the issue. What's the issue is doing the right thing for training, education, research. We just decided to spread the love around a little bit, and that's why we did what we did. For us to be able to take some of our wealth and put it in an environment that I'm passionate about and Julia has become very passionate about, for me, there's no better place. It's like Dorothy said, there's no place but home.
These are very special people. I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding, sometimes with fundraising, that donors are one-dimensional, or that fundraising is a sort of a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, everybody else loses. This is a great example of how everybody wins, and again we amplified the magnitude of their giving, which benefited not just UCF. You've done your job right in fundraising when they thank you before you can thank them. They are so joyful about this gift. They've never felt better about anything. And it's a remarkable thing, a $3 million endowed directorship for Dr. Beidel of the PTSD clinic. Jim's an Army veteran whose sons are veterans, one of whom came back from service with PTSD, and that was the initial draw. But then getting to know Michael Johnson, became fascinated with all the College of Science was doing and wanted to endow a professorship there and give $1 million to our coastal research and the sea turtles program. And Julia, his lovely wife, who knows 6 or 7 languages and wants to learn more and is doing so online with us, wanted to give to modern languages. So and then they host a party at their house prior to the SMU football game. Meet Danny. They've got a beautiful suite at our football games, and just decided the time is right to make a gift to football, so they gave $1 million to that too. I need more people like this. So I think that's the end of my slides, correct? And now I invite folks up. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Deborah Beidel. Many of you know, head of the PTSD Restores Clinic here at UCF. I'm inviting up Ray Allen, our head of fundraising and development for the College of Sciences, and now many other colleges here at UCF, and Danny White, Dr. Daniel White, our athletic director. Is Bill up for this one? No, we'll invite him up later. So, have a seat. I'll stay over here. And by the way, actually, Ray, I'm going to start with you. I said 6.6 million. The video showed 7.95. I think that had to do with the difference between sort of cash pledges and some of this being in his estate plan. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's on.
it's on. There you The cumulative was all of his gifts combined. So
Okay.
this last gift was 6.6 million, but the rest of that number reflects his previous giving. So as any other major donor, they grow in their commitment and their enthusiasm for the institution. This just reflects it.
That is an important point in this. Very rarely do donors go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. It usually starts with more modest gifts. And Ray was involved in that early on, and the development of that relationship in such a way that he could bring Jim into the fold of all that was going on at the university, as well as Julia, and understanding complications of him getting involved in selling a business that he had started up, and us needing to be patient. This money wasn't available for some period of time, but it didn't mean that we weren't actively engaged. Let me move to Deb. Why don't you talk a little bit more, Dr. Beidel, about your part in this relationship, and what kind of impact will this have on the program? What does $3 million mean to you?
A lot. Everything. I first met Jim because UCF Restores started as a research project, and we were treating veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan with combat-related post-traumatic stress disorder. And my colleagues, Clint Bowers and Amy Newens and Sandra and I looked at each other one day as the grant was running out, and we said, what are we going to do? We can't stop this clinic. We can't stop treating people. And so we started to think about fundraising, and that's when Jim came to us, and we started to talk about what his passion was. And his passion, he was a medic in the Army and had seen a lot of people with PTSD, and so his passion was treating veterans. And I always start my presentations by saying that our clinic is really like a three-legged stool. We have the research, we have the clinic, and we have education. And as you can see, that's what Jim says in his in the video, that those are the three things he's passionate about. So it was really a good match. And the initial amount of money that he gave was $200,000, which he put into the current spending because he knew we were running out of money. And he's like, is that all you need? Will $200,000 be enough? And I said, yeah, that's good for a start. We can manage on that. But it gave us the cushion to then go and get other gifts and get other grants to be able to keep the clinic going.
One of the things that's true about Mr. Rosengren that you find with a lot of big donors is they're very interested in leverage. They're very interested in how their gift can be exponentially leveraged. And I think that speaks to what Dr. Beidel just mentioned. First was getting her over the hump to get some grants, to get some more gifts. But then as we got closer and started talking about a bigger contribution, the idea of sustainable income for the program, thus endowment, became a driver. Suddenly the idea of endowing her position so that you don't have to worry about how do I pay for myself and keep this thing going became a major driver for him. And again, I think it's helpful for us all to consider what's on the donor's mind, what's important to them, what will work for them strategically. Let me turn to Danny, who's later in this, this build-up of a conversation and relationship building. He, started with Dr. Beidel. It becomes clear he's an athletics fan. Gets one of the bungalows down on the field and becomes more engaged. How were you introduced to Jim and Julia, and how did that conversation progress?
Yeah, I guess I was probably more of a bystander. Ray did a phenomenal job, obviously, with Jim and Julie and Mark Wright, our fundraising lead in athletics. But I think it was that concept of leverage you just touched on, Mike. I think initially he was looking for a suite for the College of Science, and we didn't have one. We've been sold out since we opened the stadium, but we had been playing with this concept of field cabanas, which is an open air, not a traditional bricks and mortar, but with Florida weather, something you can sell as an asset. In this way, the College of Science can have scientists can have a a place to host people and potentially generate new philanthropic activity. But at the same time, the athletics department now, with the field cabanas all sold out, which they are, that generates about $200,000 a year. So that's like a $4 or $5 million endowment that will spin off cash for the coming years. And I think that excited Jim, that his seed money was allowing a lot of things to happen. And so it actually became, the field cabanas became national news. They're the first of their kind in college football. Every single national broadcast, they talked about it, and we've now sold out the north end zone, so we're in the process of figuring out how to build that out for next year. So it really started a conversation that we had this idea, but we didn't have the funding to make it happen. And Jim and Julia had this strong interest in helping out other areas of the university and helping to ignite some, pun I guess intended, but to ignite some philanthropic activity, and we just found a lot of wins across the board. And in the process, I think they were already sports fans, but they've become pretty big sports fans. I know Julia came to our football coaches clinic, ladies coaches clinic, and she had a blast there, and they were gracious to host all of our donors on the trip out to SMU. So it's been a great partnership across the university, and I think that they can continue to do a lot more for UCF as things grow.
That's one of the things, again, talking about this box, they're not inviting, their 20 closest friends. They're often giving us the tickets back. They're telling Ray, bring your top prospects, bring faculty that have done well. Let's celebrate. Let me talk to them. Let me tell them why we're writing this check. It's very contagious. It's another thing I think is that peer solicitation and peer cultivation, peer to peer, alumnus to alumnus, friend to friend. We're both successful people. I wrote a big check. Why don't you? Sometimes can go a very long way in ways that maybe even professional fundraiser can't go. Ray, talk a little bit more about, so this is 2, 3, 4 years or more in the making. Talk about some of the other steps you took in building the relationship, the little touches that were involved. How did you introduce the coastal research part, or how did Dean Johnson?
Well, part of this relationship that started was when we introduced Jim to Deborah, and they began a strong relationship. And the conversation, before he made his first major gift, he was up and down actually for a little bit. It was not a done deal by any means. What had happened in the interim, part of the relationship building that the dean and I used, was I invited Jim to the bowl game in 2014. And then he kind of was in an up and down moment. And then the next relationship, the dean and I reached out to him and invited him to the Stanford UCF game out in California. Fortunately, both these games, fortunately his gift wasn't based on us winning on those 2 games, but but he came to the Stanford game, and he literally told Dean Johnson and I, your invitation fired me up, and that's the reason that I'm going to go ahead and do now my commitment. And he told us all that basically that was part of what was the impetus for him. So he did his first $1 million commitment there. When afterwards, and at that trip was also the beginning of him saying, athletics, you used that to help cultivate me to do this gift. How can I help the College of Science? Would the College of Science use this concept of helping cultivate more academic gifts? Dean Johnson and I looked at each other and I said, well, of course. And he says, if I got you a suite, would you do that? And I think he gave Mark a really hard time over that course of that Stanford trip about how we can accomplish that. And they came up with a plan, and that's how that part of the next gift came along, which was for the cabanas. The next part was Julia had a very big interest in languages. And we'd been talking a little bit, and then Julia said, hey, do you have an immersion program? Do you have something at UCF? Because, that's where we're in love with UCF. So I reached out to the arts and humanities people. We had a 3-week Russian immersion program, told her about it, got on the phone with the faculty member. Yes, we'd love to have them because it was open for outside public, not just students the way it was. Got her here. 4 days after she's in the program, I get a call from Jim. Hey, Julia wants to do $100,000 for the language arts program. Can we do that? Of course. You know, and so that ended up being the next gift for him. And then her passion. Why she was here, we had actually had another visit, another donor that we were bringing out to visit the sea turtle. So I'd already set up a trip with Dr. Mansfield and our sea turtle program. I said, would you like to tag along? Let's, you know, I knew she was interested in animals. Oh yeah, that would be great. So we went out and did this, ended up the other donors bailed out that night. So she got all the attention from Dr. Mansfield and her students. We ended up having a great visit out there. Next thing I know, Jim's calling me a few weeks later, can we talk about the sea turtles? Yes, we can. Now, Jim wanted to do something right there, and this is an important part of the conversation. Jim was ready to do something right there, but we also knew that Jim was looking at a larger, more comprehensive gift. So I actually put him off for a little bit. I kind of said, Jim, let's talk about that when we get to the bigger gift, when we talk about it. Because he was ready to go ahead and do something simple, but I really wanted to talk about the bigger gift with him and the comprehensive component of what he wants to do, and that kind of led to the next conversation. And instead of him just doing a quick $100,000, it ended up being a conversation that I made sure Dean Johnson had with him about priorities of the college, because he was asking that. It was priorities of the university, priorities of Deborah's, priorities of athletics. Those conversations were not one conversation, but multiple, with all parties involved in the conversation, that led Jim to understand how and what he wanted to support that led to the larger gift.
That's absolutely right. I will say, too, he's a competitive man. As these conversations coalesced, I can remember us being in Dallas, and Ray and I were setting up, and catering was coming in for the party we were going to have the night before the game. And he said over the kitchen table, remind me again, what's the biggest alumni gift you've ever had at UCF? And Ray said, well, collectively, I think it'd be like $6 million. That night, he announced 6.6. Intentionally, he wanted to be number one. He wanted to be in first place. All the sort of tumblers fell into order, and that is an important aspect. I think sometimes for our immediate needs, we can all be guilty of, this includes development officers who have annual goals and quarterly goals of going for the quick hit, the 10 or the 25 or the $50,000, woohoo, win. But if there's $1 million opportunity, it pays to be patient and to think about this in the context of a long-term relationship. That's what we want. We're very committed to stewardship. Our best donors are past donors if we've done our job right. And again, I think with you, Dr. Beidel, this was an evolving relationship. There's got to be, beyond the money, there's got to be a pride in the notion of your professorship, this directorship, bearing the Rosengren name as close as you've become to them, that will be on your letterhead, that will be on your business card. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we have become friends with Jim and Julia. I think that's really the case for all of us. When they're in town, we go out to dinner. You know, he's always after me, when's your husband going to let me play golf with him? When are we going to do that? You know, we're friends on Facebook. I think he gets kind of tired of pictures of my dog, which is the only thing I post on Facebook. But, you know, we have each other's cell phones. We have each other's texts. We were texting on Easter. And so I think it really has become a long-term relationship. He told me early on he was going to give me $1 million, but then, you know, this took a lot of time, and I really feel like we were vetted. He would keep coming back with different people. You know, I want this person who was the head of the VA to hear about your program. I want this person to hear about your program. So we did the dog and pony show, as I call it, you know, maybe 10, 12 times before it looked like he was really going to go through with it. So I think he really worked us to make sure that we were solid and that he was going to be able to support that. So, but we have become, you know, when I see the video now, I just laugh because he picked up last year when he was in France, and he would call me from France, and he would go, you know, he'd be talking from France, he'd go, oh, I learned that over here. So it's become a very close relationship. So to the point where we know the kids, we know the kids' dogs, we know the travel, we know pretty much everything. So.
It's a beautiful thing. Danny, last question for Danny, sort of a two-parter, and then we'll open it up if the audience has questions. A two-parter: how will the Rosengrens' contribution to the Football Excellence Fund help the program? And the second part: what other opportunities do you see for athletics and our academic leaders to work together? I think, once again, I think there's sometimes a perception that it's a kind of an all or nothing, zero-sum game kind of a thing when athletics is involved, but in our conversations, that's been, quite the contrary with you.
Yeah, there's no question, and I'm looking forward to, on the sponsorship side, to Kira getting on the ground running and be able to have more. What Bill and I have talked about is having someone more focused on other areas across the university, where then we can maybe have, not maybe, we want to have those collaborative conversations. So when Mark first told me about this concept, probably one of the first things I said to Mark when he and I started working together, I got here about 2.5 years ago, was let's see where we can get a big win-win, where there's a donation for athletics and somewhere else across the campus to show that we're not just talking about being collaborators. Here's some proof. And so this happened probably maybe a year into our time working together, and I was excited about it for that reason. I wanted to be helpful to get something done for the university, and then I was surprised on the back end when they ended up deciding to make the $1 million commitment for athletics. We never drove it there. I think it was their passion. They got excited about what we have going on. So we have all the major gift, significant major gift activity we're doing right now is going towards, I call it working capital, but we have about $25 million of facility needs that we've grown really fast as an athletics department. 10 years or so ago, we were in a much lower level conference. To just check the boxes and have the same kind of facilities that our competitors have, to have an athletics department, we're literally an athletics department without an athletics department right now. We need to make these investments, and it has to come from philanthropy. So the naming opportunity is for our game day locker room, and we're going to make some upgrades to that. For us, how your facilities appear becomes critical because recruiting. It's incredibly competitive in all of our sports, but there's a very small percentage of high school prospects out there that are better than the kids we have, and that's who we should always be recruiting, is someone that's maybe a little more talented than the ones we have. And it's not a secret who these kids are. Everybody knows who the best athletes are across the country in their sport. And so chances are, if they are that good, they have spent a heck of a lot of time practicing and training their sport. So the facilities they're going to be training and practicing and competing in are going to matter. And we have to play the game. We're naive if we think that we don't. And our competitors within our own conference have facilities that we don't have. And so the $25 million kind of small athletics capital campaign project within the Ignite campaign is geared at just solving those issues so we can be highly competitive and we can expect to dominate the conference that we're in. So somewhere along the line, I think Jim learned about those conversations, probably talked to some of our other donors who were involved and on some of these football trips and wanted to participate. And so that gift will ultimately probably go towards the athletics headquarter building, which will house all of athletic administration. I call it the culture building. I'm really excited about it because we're going to be integrating administration with our football program, with our football coaches, and also 2 Olympic sport programs. Both men's and women's soccer will be in that building, and a lot of our Olympic sport coaches. And it's right smack dab in the middle of our athletics footprint. So it'll create a lot of human interaction, which I think is really healthy for our culture. Our administrative setup will be a modern office space, very few offices, very few walls, to, again, just really encourage collaboration and interaction.
And we can, these are all assets we can utilize in cultivating relationships, identifying relationships, stewarding relationships. When we do meet with a donor prospect, when we're getting to know somebody, I will say athletics has been a great partner in helping us to provide them with a great opportunity to go to a football, basketball, baseball game, something like that. It's entertainment, it's fun, it's engaging. It's a great way to spend time with people, but the same thing across campus. And we're trying to open people's eyes when you have this kind of scale and excellence to all the possibilities at a place like this. I find myself saying frequently, you know, if you have a passion, we've got a program. I mean, there's just virtually nothing in this world that you could be passionate about that we don't have someone working in that area. And that's a distinct asset for us, and one that we want to utilize such that everybody wins. So I'll stop there and I'll open it up for questions. We have a microphone so that you can be amplified. Who has a question about what we were talking about or in general? Dean G.
Hi, thank you. This was a great panel. I appreciate it. I thought that the relationship that you built with the donor was excellent, and I like the fact that multiple units came to place that benefited from these relationships. So my question is that, and maybe any one of you can answer, is this interactivity amongst the development officers happening in a proactive fashion or a reactive fashion?
Ray?
I'd like to think, you know, Dean Johnson is a great leader in this. When I first came here, he and I had a long conversation. And the first conversation we said was, in the work that I do, UCF first, College of Science second. And even though I worked in the College of Science, because we had the understanding that if we worked on a donor with the focus of UCF, even though we engaged them, that the college was going to get more than its fair share of those gifts to meet its goals. And by having that approach with anything we did, it's the first thing with any key donor is you listen to what the donor wants. You get the transformational gifts by getting the donor to think about and engage in what they're passionate about. We then show them where they can direct that passion here at the university. Now, when it comes to the other work with the other development officers, all the development officers, we talk a lot amongst ourselves. When we have a donor that has interest in there, I'll pick up the phone to that donor, that development officer, and have an engagement conversation. Hey, my donor has an interest here, you know, and I was on the phone the other day about another program that the donor has with another development officer to see how we can engage that person. What do you have that I can share with that donor, et cetera? And that's an ongoing, everyday activity we do in the development world.
Yeah, it's not a perfect science, but we're trying to encourage that sort of university citizenship, and I think the deans have backed us on this. Again, trying to maximize the donor's potential. And we have to keep in mind that today's, one slide I didn't show today, as it relates to donors at this institution, only about a third of our donors are actually alumni. The other third are just community citizens who have adopted us, and the other third is foundations and corporations. They all have different interests and needs. You can't assume just because somebody went to the College of Science, graduated from there, or their child did, that their only interest is College of Science, or that because they're in the field of engineering, their only interest is engineering. In fact, in my 30-year career, I've been scolded by alumni who have said, you know, you come up here talking about the same thing every time when my interest is opera. And if you'd been listening, you'd know that. So talk to me about arts and humanities. That's on us. It's not to be talking all the time. It's to be active listeners, to ask open-ended questions. So, Michael, we are trying to collaborate across the board while protecting your interests. I mean, I will say there's risk at play when you're the chair of a department or the dean of a school, and somebody that's been a donor to you expresses an interest in something else. There is a little bit of propriety. There is a little bit of, well, I think it's on us to show, to build trust enough to know that, you know, we're not going to try to lead that donor astray. We're not going to try to steer them to something else. Donors don't respond to being steered. Donors don't respond to you telling them what your priorities are. What they respond to is what their needs are, and we have to be, I think, well educated on what the different opportunities might be. long-winded answer, but I hope that helps. Others? Let me, okay, right here.
One of the things that continually surprises and impresses me is when I go to some other part of the university that I don't normally circulate in and discover just how amazing the stuff is that goes on, and just practically everywhere I go. When I talk to my neighbors, they don't know about it.
Yeah.
They know about UCF 20, 30 years ago when they were here. They say, wow, things have changed over there, but they don't know how, other than that we built a lot of buildings. We have faculty all over the place who work with their professional society to do outreach videos. We never seem to pick them up here. We struggle to put together a website that looks, not amateur, never mind really professional and great and that would attract donors, but just something that doesn't embarrass us. I would love to see, resources go into getting our story out there, building our brand locally. Like you said, 2/3 of the donors are not UCF alumni. There's an awful lot of wealthy people that move to Florida to retire, and I would love to see them think about us when they think about excellent universities, in addition to the ones that they came from or that they knew about in the places they used to live.
I concur. I agree 100%. If Grant was here, he would, head of communications and marketing, he would say the same thing. We're working on that. I think there is a strategy coming into the new year for us to be more forthcoming about those things. It's been kind of a best-kept secret for too long. And even our alumni, that's always a stunning thing when you get them back after 10 or 20 or 30 years. And they get the newsletter, they get Pegasus Magazine, they get our email. They are just stunned at what's happening here. We can do much better. And then, that's half the battle, is getting them refamiliarized with what goes on. So I'm with you.
I would also say in my work and daily interactions with people, I would encourage every person and every employee who is part of UCF is an ambassador of UCF.
Yeah.
We all have to share the message continuously. And if we're not doing that, then we're missing the opportunity. I share it every day and I go out and I see it. Part of the strength of this university and other universities that have big programs is that their entire staff, faculty, administration are all sharing the message of what they're about. So I encourage everybody, be part of that solution.
But you have to have the right story, and by that I mean I've struggled for years as an academic to not speak science to donors. And this one yells at me all the time when I'm doing too much of the science talk. But, he says, tell the stories. And I think that's something that's really difficult for lots of faculty because we're trained to say, well, we had a p-value of less than 0.05 and to think about it in terms, and this was really something with Jim too, because Jim would call me up just randomly and ask me questions like, I don't understand, what does the provost of a university do? Or, he would say, now tell me again why your program is better than, and to be able to talk about things in terms that people understand and not just other academics understand is, I think, something that we really have to struggle with.
That's true. I mean, Jim Rosengren doesn't know how many papers you've published. In the academic world, that's really important. He doesn't care. He wants to know people who are hurting, people that are struggling are being helped. And there's so much more to it, and we've filled in the blanks. I think we can do a better job at that across the board. I was speaking to a donor the other day, and he was kidding me a little bit about our reach for the stars kind of motto and aspiration. And I said, it's come true. I mean, we're in charge of the Arecibo telescope now. I mean, we are literally shooting, beams into the universe that nobody else can do. Half of the NASA scientists and the folks working for Elon Musk and for Bezos are our graduates. This isn't science fiction. It's happening right here, and that shut them up quick. I mean, we're it wasn't intended to be a slight, but the point is we should be proud and bold about the stuff happening at this place. And now's the time. This is a pivot point. We need to honor Dr. Hitt and his legend and what's been built, to get behind Dale, to seize the things in this strategic plan and in this campaign, and then get ready for the next one. Because all signs, point to the stars. Great things lie ahead, and we know philanthropy will be a big part of that. Sponsorships will be a big part of that. So think out of the box. Help us with that as you meet people. We're anxious to work with you. Back to Elizabeth Dooley.
Thank you, Mike and Bill, and thank you all for your contributions. You truly are making a difference. And so at this point, we're going to introduce Dr. Lisa Jones. Come on forward, Dr. Jones, and she will take us to the Marchioli Collective Impact Award.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dooley. Good afternoon, everyone. What a great session we just had, and I'm looking forward to having another great session with our presentation of our Marchioli Collective Impact Innovation Award. As many of you know, the award began and it was launched about a year ago through the generosity of Mr. Nelson Marchioli, who is our chairman of our UCF Foundation board and also a 1972 UCF alum. And with this award, it provides $5,000 to a faculty member or a staff member or a team who has developed and implemented an innovative program, project, initiative that will help us reach our strategic goals and our strategic plan. So before I move any further, I want to thank and acknowledge Mr. Nelson Marchioli for his generosity and really for believing in collective impact. And as one of the presenters said, directing your passion towards collective impact, and we know you give to other areas as well. It's truly an investment in faculty and staff, and it really encouraged them and rewards them for innovating. So thank you. And join me. Thank you. Thank you, sir. So if we look at the award criteria for just a second, and as we think about that award criteria, UCF is already one of the most innovative institutions in the nation. We wouldn't be where we are in just a little over 50 short years were this not true. However, through our Innovation Award, we are not only leveraging, right? We're leveraging the culture of innovation that's already here at UCF, and we're amplifying it. I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of criteria specifically. So one is, that the innovation must relate to one or more, right, of our priority metrics. I was reading a Harvard Business Review article the other day, and I felt really proud of what we're doing because the whole article was about how, innovation is the hot buzzword and it's the hot thing to do now, and you just don't innovate for innovation's sake. You just don't, try to think of something new or, make a change, because change management and transformative change are also big issues. But you don't do that just for the innovation's sake. You do it because that innovation effort is closely aligned with your business strategy. So the number one criteria is that it must be aligned with those priority metrics and be driving us in a positive direction towards achieving those. Another one of the criteria is that it could be something new, right? So the innovation could be something new, or it could be an enhancement to an existing project or initiative, right? That will help us best reach those strategic goals. And when you think about it and you look at the literature on innovation, You know, most innovations are incremental in nature, right? So most innovations aren't the, disruptive, the transformative, huge, new, hot, flashy innovations. Those get the attention. But oftentimes the innovation really is about continuing your creativity around the ideas, the great ideas you already have. How do you refine those ideas? How do you enhance them, right, to have greater impact? So we wanted to recognize that and recognize existing innovation as well. Having documented outcomes is critically important, right? And making sure that, you have meticulously measured those. This is the most, in terms of strategic plans, I've not seen one that has held an organization, an institution so accountable. And so with this award, we're furthering that and said the impacts have to be, of course, documented and measured. So you can guess that the kind of intended outcomes we're looking for through this award, but I want to share very quickly that there have been some unintended, right, benefits as well. So there can be only one recipient. However, all of the finalists are invited to have one-on-one discussions about how they can enhance their projects and programs. And so we talk about whatever the issue is. If the issue for the selection committee was that they needed to talk about how it could be scaled up, because we know we achieve our greatest impact when we use the power of our scale. Or it could be that they need better methods or more rigorous methods for documenting the impact, or whatever the issue is, the one-on-one time and helping them think through that. And a lot of the finalists have come back and said, they've really enhanced their programs, or they've been able to use the feedback to enhance grant applications. And we have metrics related to increased grant funding as well, or they've used them for manuscript development. So those are some of the kind of unintended benefits, and I've already have a lot of the finalists from this round who have their one-on-one set up. So it's certainly about driving and pushing innovation and shaping it and molding it, but it's creating the atmosphere to produce more. The next slide. So we, again, had a 7-member selection committee consisting of some very distinguished faculty and staff. It was cross-disciplinary on purpose. We wanted different feedback, and each of those committee members, they read each application and they ranked them and provided detailed rationale so that when we got together and had the in-depth discussions, we could really dissect these and give each application the consideration that it was due. So in the essence of time, I'm not going to name the individuals or go through their names, but if they're here, please stand and we'll recognize them. I know I saw a couple, and Dr. Chopra's here and many others, so let's just give them a hand because that takes a lot of time. They put a lot into it. They've done a great job in narrowing it down. The last slide, please. So when I was thinking about how to frame this award recipient, I was drawn to some words that you said, Nelson, so I'm going to quote you. You were asked, why did you fund this collective impact award? And so I'd like to share what you said, and I quote, "If we're going to be the entrepreneurial, innovative, and forward-thinking institution we aspire to be, we're going to have to do things like this to generate ideas and follow through on those ideas. The kind of ideas that can change the world." So we've had 2 award winners thus far, Dr. Jennifer Kent Walsh and Dr. Ron Damara. And if you've not had an opportunity to look at how their projects are impacting lives, not only in the region but beyond, there is a shameless plug for our website up in the corner. Go there and check it out. Truly amazing work they've done. But I'm so very excited about this next award recipient. Not only is it carrying forward the spirit of Mr. Marchioli's vision, not only is this center transforming lives, it's literally saving lives. So it's my pleasure to bring up Dr. Teresa Dorman, who's the Associate Dean in the College of Sciences, who's going to announce our award recipient for 2018.
Good afternoon. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Deborah Beidel and her team, who are the winner of the 2018 Marchioli Collective Impact Award. As a professor of psychology and medical education, Deborah joined the faculty of UCF in 2007. In 2011, a grant supported the development of UCF Restores, a clinical research center dedicated to the treatment of anxiety, trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, in combat veterans and active duty military personnel. Since its inception, a unique feature of UCF Restores is how they develop and use established and emerging technologies to enhance prevention, intervention, treatment, and resiliency efforts with affected clients. Dr. Beidel and the clinic received over $15 million in grant support from external agencies, including the Department of Defense, the National Institute of Mental Health, the Department of Justice in the state of Florida. And they have another $10 million in awards that are pending. To highlight just a few of the funded research achievements, one of the first awards came from the Military Operational Medicine Research Program of the U.S. Army Medical Research and Material Command. With this one of the first $5.1 million awards, Dr. Beidel and her team examined the effectiveness of 2 different treatments for soldiers of the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts who suffered from combat-related PTSD. This project augmented established behavioral treatments using virtual reality to provide an enhanced treatment experience. A later award from the National Institute of Mental Health supported the development of virtual environments that enhanced behavioral treatments for children with social anxiety disorders. In January 2013, the Department of Defense's congressionally directed medical research program awarded Dr. Beidel and her team another $2.7 million grant. This project uses neurobiological measures of stress and traditional measures of psychological adjustment to examine the impact of military deployment on spouses and children. The central feature of the UCF Restores Clinic is the use of evidence-based behavioral treatments, such as exposure therapy, to treat the debilitating effects of PTSD. Under the guidance of a psychologist, we know that repeated exposure to the thoughts or images of a traumatic event or experience, that'll actually help to reduce the fear and anxiety associated with it. However, with this exposure therapy, it's really sometimes impossible to recreate the actual traumatic events that veterans or first responders actually experience. To improve the effectiveness of this therapy, the clinic developed these innovative and unique uses of virtual reality, the virtual reality software. They also use sensory stimuli such as sights, smells, and sounds to recreate these experiences. The UCF Restores Clinic is the only treatment program in the country that uses virtual reality as well as an intensive 3-week treatment format to treat PTSD. In addition to the exposure therapy, clients who participate also have skill-building workshops to address the other complaints that often burden students who are dealing with PTSD. These workshops include treatment for insomnia, anger management strategies, problem-solving therapies, and behavioral treatments for depression. The early success of the clinic is accounted for in a publication in the Journal of Anxiety Disorders. That study showed that of the clients treated, over 60% of them who had PTSD no longer met the criteria for the disorder after completing the 3-week intensive treatment. This intervention was also shown to be 2 to 3 times more effective than current Veteran Affairs treatment for PTSD. Ever aware of the need for expanding and improving the services, when Dr. Bowers, who's also here today, when he joined, he's a fellow professor and clinician, when he partnered with Dr. Beidel, Restores entered the prevention and resiliency arena, offering first responders educational workshops on peer support training. June 12th, 2016. On June 12th, 2016, UCF Restores received a phone call from the Orlando Fire Department. "We need you down here right now." It was just a few hours after a gunman had walked into the Pulse nightclub, killing 49 people and injuring another 53. Throughout the week, UCF Restores conducted debriefings for the general community and for first responders, and it established a treatment program for first responders and mass shooting victims. Since that time, UCF Restores has provided no-cost therapy for PTSD and related disorders to over 300 veterans, 100 first responders, and dozens of victims of traumatic events, including survivors of Pulse, Las Vegas, and now, unfortunately, most recently, Parkland, Florida. Although started as a research and treatment program for our veterans, the need and importance of this program's work far exceeds that of the initial research project. Focused on the citizens of Florida, those who work at the UCF Restores Clinic, the faculty, the staff, and the students, they are committed to continuing their efforts to provide services not only to veterans, active duty personnel, and first responders, but to all citizens of Florida. The success of UCF Restores is immeasurable in the context of the lives saved and the livelihoods rehabilitated. It's this success that's evident in its commitment to restoring lives, families, and communities. Please join me in welcoming and congratulating Dr. Deborah Beidel and her team of the UCF Restores Clinic.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Marchioli, for your generous gift and your confidence in us. We're very honored. This is not something that someone does by herself, and so I would like to ask my colleagues and my students and my staff who are here today to please stand up, because I just get to get the credit. They do all the work. Thank you. Could we show that little bit of tape, the video?
I was driving along. It was midday. It was July 5th. It was 2007, and basically we ran over a bomb, an IED. When I gained consciousness, I remember the other vehicles from the north side coming to help us out as we were being ambushed, and I saw their vehicle, their Bradley, engulfed, by a big ball, of smoke and fire.
It's like a movie that has no end. It just keeps replaying. You can't sleep because your body is so wound up. You're hypervigilant. You're looking back and front and forward, and you don't trust people. You don't know what they're going to do.
I felt like I was very hopeless, and nobody, could help me, or nobody could understand me. I couldn't maintain a job. I was destroying my entire life, as well as people's lives around me. And I didn't really see myself ever getting better.
I would try to seek a lot of thrills, or try to get that adrenaline rush, and it was basically through bad means. I didn't want to get any help. I'm fine, nothing's wrong with me, but there's a lot of my actions that said differently.
The Restore program saved my life. They gave me a new understanding of myself.
One morning, a Monday morning, we got a call from the clinic on the first floor of the psychology building, and the receptionist said, "Dr. Neer, your 9 o'clock appointment is here." And Dr. Neer said to me, "I don't have a 9 o'clock appointment." And we went down, and there was a man waiting there. He was from Colorado. He had heard about our program on Facebook. He took literally his last dollar and bought a plane ticket from Colorado to Orlando. And then, because it was his last dollar, he walked 17 miles from the airport to the front door of our building, not having an appointment, but so desperate for care. The VA hadn't been able to help him, and he just decided he had to come to UCF Restores. I want to read to you a Facebook posting from a first responder who says, "PTSD for fighter fighters is real. If your loved one is experiencing signs, get them help quickly. 27 years of deaths and babies dying in your hands is a memory that you will never get rid of. It haunted me daily until now. My love to my crews. Be safe. Take care. I love you all." And then in his dress uniform, Captain Dangerfield drove to a rural area of his county and shot himself, leaving behind a wife, children, and a fire company devastated by his death. Another first responder had committed suicide because of untreated PTSD. Most people don't know that more law enforcement officers kill themselves by suicide than die at the hands of a felon each year because of post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's these stories, these are the reasons why we looked at each other one day and said, we can't let this go. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we cannot let this go. People who are in need of such help and have trouble reaching out, and we wanted to be the place where people could go for help. The outcomes and the impacts of our program, I think, can be measured in many different ways. Our treatment program has provided, as Dr. Dorman said, a number of successful treatment cases. We've treated people from over 28 different states now who have come to our program, our 3-week program that everyone told us it was very dangerous to do because we create people who would want to commit suicide because of the stress or would drink too much, and none of that happened. We just decided we knew how to do it and we were going to do it anyway. After the death of an Orange County fire lieutenant, again, who committed suicide, we had 45 telephone calls that week of people wanting to come in for care, afraid that they might be the next one who might be pushed over the edge. I had a call from someone out in the Panhandle who said, "You tell them all. You tell them I've seen one too many suicides, I've seen one too many homicides, I've seen one too many car wrecks. I can't keep this up anymore, and someone has to do something about it." Our peer support training program that's led by Dr. Bowers has trained over 600 first responders, and the data indicate that the program increases knowledge and skills. We're training peers to recognize the support, or give them the support and recognize the stress that is in their fellow first responders and showing them how they can help their other first responders get some care. And because of this training, the peer supporters in Central Florida actually prevented a suicide. They were able to get to this person in time and call us, and we were able to save one person. We're about to stand up a new clinical research program where we're going to take our treatment program and we're going to 3 military installations funded by a grant from the Joint Warfighters Initiative. We're going to Eisenhower Army Medical Center, Portsmouth Naval Center, and we're also going to Camp Lejeune, and we're going to put this program out there and start to disseminate it nationally. We train students in research from undergraduate to postdoc level. At one point, we had 20 undergraduate students working with us. I didn't even know their names. I just knew they were here and working with us. We fund 12 graduate students in our program and train them, and they are going and they are taking jobs in VAs because they're determined that we're going to make the VA a better system as well. We get requests all the time. We get requests for clinic expansions. Brevard is making me crazy trying to get a clinic over there. Hillsdale County, our peer support program, again, the FLETC, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, wants our program in their curriculum for all federal law enforcement officers to be trained in peer support. One Central Florida Police Department ordered all the officers 1 year after Pulse to get themselves to Restores for a checkup before that, the next anniversary happened. We've been contacted by other communities, as Dr. Dorman said. After Las Vegas shooting, the Las Vegas city officials called the city of Orlando, and the city of Orlando told them to call Restores to get help for their first responders. And more recently, we've been working with mass shooting survivors. We've been working with Pulse families. We've been working with survivors of Pulse. How will we use this money? We're going to put it in an account, and we're going to use it to treat even more people. People who can't afford to get themselves to Orlando for treatment, we'll be able to pay for them to come. We'll be able to pay for their hotel to stay here. I was once recently asked by a television reporter, how does it feel to be an expert in mass shootings? I said I was just angry that there had to be an expert in mass shootings. That wasn't something I thought we should have any expertise in. And people often ask us, why do we do what we do and how do we do it? All that pain, all that sorrow, how do we do it? Well, recently I had the experience of seeing what an AR-15 does to the arm of a 16-year-old girl, and I don't ever want to see that again. We listened to a 14-year-old boy who saw his 3 classmates killed right in front of him and listened to what his experience was like. This is why we do what we do. We want to be there. These people, veterans, first responders, active duty personnel, victims of mass shootings, we want to be there. They're the reason we do this. And it's the reason that our hashtag has become #TraumaWon'tWin. So thank you very much for your support. It's a pleasure to be here and share our program with you today.
Wow, this is an amazing, amazing story. Thank you so much for your contributions. My goodness, you're touching people's lives and you're compelling others to give, to support your efforts. Mr. Marchioli, would you please join me? I want to share this moment with all of you. Dr. Jones, please come up. We'd like to present you with this certificate on behalf of the university and on behalf of you leaving a legacy with us and for your team providing the impact that it does. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And she's very gracious. Thank you so much. So thank you all for coming and participating. This is our final forum, and we'll start it over again in the fall. So stay tuned for what is to come.